We've got our stuff. We've got our mostly finished Dr. M Morel. Let's get finished. Dr. M is a fairly tall and narrow person, and so she will need to be stuffed with a real eye to making sure that she is heavy enough to bring her center of gravity down so that she is also stable. So one thing you may want to do is add a cardboard base to her body here. That's an option. I'm not going to be doing it for my second one. It's not required, but if you are concerned about stability, adding more flatness can really help. The other thing to note is that after you've stuffed most of Dr. M here, what you can do is put her on your hand, and if you shake her and she really tips, she's probably doesn't have a lower enough center of gravity. So then you take out the fluffy stuffing and increase your ratio of weighted stuffing to the size of her. I give amounts based on the kind of stuffing I'm using, but my stuffing may be heavier than yours depending on what you've chosen to stuff with. So doing the shake test is always a good plan. I like split peas, but there are lots of other choices. If you are new to my toy or my gnomes, you can go to the gnome schooling playlist here on YouTube. I'll link it down below, and I explain the variety of weighted and fluffy stuffings and other materials that you might want to use. I'm going to fill at least the bottom third here. Whenever you're stuffing, the temptation is to look at the size and just sort of jam as much as you think it will need in one fell swoop, but it is something I recommend that you go slower and smaller. You're much less likely to get lumps and bumps and wobbliness, distortion when you go slowly. So go with a little bit at a time. Dr. Morel does have a very tall structure, as I was mentioning, so if you want to kind of fold things back and then stuff down, that's always a good option. I like to get my stuffing in and then make sure that it's spread out from side to side so that I'm adding layers rather than chunks. And then I use the outside hand to kind of push back against that and do some shaping. So the inside is spreading and compacting, and then the inside is and then the outside hand here is feeling, is that too much? Is that too little? Is this really dense compared to what's around it? Maybe then we kind of loosen things up. You do want the body to be fairly stable so that the weight of the top doesn't cause it to kind of pooch down. So you want this to be fairly stable, fairly I don't want to say stiffly stuffed, but you also don't want there to be a big difference between your weighted stuffing and your fluffy stuffing, because they will act a little bit as two separate pieces. All right, so stuff up to about the stem. If you go up into the body a little bit already, that's no problem. We need to get down to this deeper part before we start closing up and getting this too skinny for us to actually get that far in. When we start, the decrease is on round 35. We start with a purl 1, and then all the way around it's a knit 1, purl 2 together. And this purl 2 together obviously is going to be missing from this section here because there's just a purl 1 here and there's a purl 1 at the end of the round. So we actually are going to work one extra bit of this round. We're actually going to purl together this stitch with this stitch when we come back around to it, and we'll have a slightly new beginning of round because of that. So I've come back around to the end of the round, so I'll knit the final knit stitch, and now I've got this remaining purl stitch right up next to the single purl stitch we started with at the beginning of the round. And so to decrease away this section, what we're going to do is we're going to purl 2 together across the beginning of round. And the pattern is written as though we're on circular needles and that there is actually a beginning of round marker between the stitches, but very few of you will actually have that. Whether you're working DPNs or magic loop, odds are you will just have sort of like marked the needle junction, that this corner of the needle, when the needles are separated here, that this is the beginning of round. So the instructions are written as though something is happening that for very few people would actually be happening, but it is the simplest way to write it, and also conforms with sort of sweater writing or hat writing, and so it might be something that's a little more conventional in terms of understanding. So if it's confusing you, I'm sorry, but we're just going to purl 2 together across that, and that way we've decreased in every one of these places where we had 2 purl stitches. Now we've just got 1. All right, so now that we've worked that decrease and then an extra round, we now are going to stuff our cap. And the one thing to note, this is a fairly simple stuff, but the one thing to note is that right here in this section where we not only had a long space between our twisted stitches, but we also increased the number of purls. Sort of from here to here, the tension is fairly similar, but right here, the tension can get very big. And what you want to probably avoid, I mean, maybe you like the look of it, you want to avoid that this bit is like really bulgy and then this bit is kind of narrower on top. So try to stuff so that you have overall a look of uniformity in the size and distribution of your stuffing. So you can see here that this version of Dr. M is sort of, it's the same roughly all the way up. And this is something that as you work the final increases, or as you work the final bit, may get mashed around. So even at the end, you can go in and just kind of tug and pull and make things puffier where you want, or you can compact things underneath where you want. So I like to stuff my ends in as well. So the same principles apply. I like to get a little bit in and spread, a little bit in and spread. Got to keep the working yarn away from this, or you can stuff it right in without meaning to. One thing to note is that the twisted stitch sections can kind of open up on you if you're overstuffing. So if you're worried about this gappiness, don't overstuff. Also, if you are really struggling with it, you can buy darker stuffing. Both polyfill and roving come in multiple colors, although you may have to order the polyfill. But if you're overstuffing it, you'll find perhaps that those places where we did the left twists and right twists that do kind of want to open up a little bit, just because we are forcing the stitches to swap places and kind of changing and distorting the fabric a bit. If you're overstuffing, you may be exposing them, whereas if you just take the stuffing down a wee bit, then you won't be having those gappy holes. Or try using a different stuffing color. So this is a good time to put it on your hand and see how wiggly it is. If it's really wiggly, like mine is really wanting to fall over, I probably have overstuffed this. I think I'm going to take mine out and put more weighted stuffing in. This one is now much more stable now that I've added about half of weighted stuffing. At this point, Dr. M Morel obviously looks very much like a morel mushroom, and you can feel free to make morel mushrooms from this pattern and not put beards and faces on. But we're going to put beards and faces on. Let's keep going. First, we're going to talk about a little thing about the feet and the nose and then the arms, and then we'll start attaching things. The feet and the nose are worked as a stubby little bit of I-cord, which is then tied together. So tie it so that whatever you think of as the less good looking side is the side that will be folded up. And then the good looking side will be to the outside. So just fold it up and tie it. And then a quick note about the arms. They are worked with some increases and decreases to make them kind of round and stubby and spherical. But you may find while you are burying the end or while you are working them that they seem to kind of stretch out and go flat and elongated. We want them to be a little more puffy. So when you are sewing this in, one thing that can happen with this end is if when you are sewing it in, you just sort of pay attention, and then when you are inserting this up, you tug it extra tight. That will sort of plump it up and make it a little rounder. So that's one way that you can make that happen. If you tap the end like this and kind of push on them, they'll ball up again. Really cute. All right, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to sew our nose to our beard. Decide which side you like better. If you're doing it with a fuzzy yarn, you may not even be able to tell which side was the side you sewed the end in on. So if that's the case, don't worry about it. You can't tell, you can't tell. So usually we sew the beard and the nose separately, but for this one, I thought we would change things up and just do them at the same time. So I'm going to sew each end through my beard. So I've got two ends on my nose. I'm going to sew them through, just affixing them right here at the very top of the beard. And then using this one now with the curled end of the nose facing downwards and the end we tied facing up, I'm going to stitch through the top of the nose here and through the top of the beard and sew that on a few times, making sure that I'm in the center. because this is where it starts to get difficult to change positioning here. So I'm going to go through a few times, securing it down. All right, and again, I'm going to double check that I like where I'm at. Now I'm going to tie a knot in these two ends, making sure to leave my fluffy end for attaching the beard to the body. And I'll just tie these as a knot. Once and then twice. Now I will bury these ends by weaving them back through the nose. So I always like to do that in one fell swoop if I can. It's a bit of a test of my threading. So if I bend them over, pinch them between my thumb and my finger, and then put the eye of the needle right above it, when I open that pinch, it starts to push it through the eye, and then I do have to push a little more firmly when I'm doing two ends at once, but I always feel like I'm winning at life when I can do two at once. So now I'm just going to go back through the nose. That's going to secure the ends inside the nose. And now all I need to do is cut them. So, like that. And they will disappear back inside. And now we attach the beard and nose as one. So, figure out which side you like best. If there's a particular angle you like, if there's a side you think is handsomer or more beautiful than the rest, go ahead. Pick that one, thread the end of the beard onto your needle. I always secure it with my thumb, and then I'm going to go under a stitch of the beard. I go under a stitch of the body, that is, and then through the beard. I go through the corner several times, and then I simply work my way across, going up and down across the garter stitches. If you want to make sure that your nose is facing a particular direction, can you see how mine's kind of going off at an angle? When I'm coming past, I can actually go and get that to be exactly the way I want. So what I could do is I'll just go back a little bit through the fabric here to line up under the nose. And if I now grab the nose fabric and sew it down to the center here of the beard as well, that should just stop it from twisting a little bit. Or I might need to be a little more aggressive with my sewing techniques to make sure that that doesn't want to twist. But there's always a chance when you're finishing your gnome to really finish it. The sewing up process is really a stage where there's a lot of scope for you to keep determining the personality of and placement of your gnome or your mushroom person. Placement really is personality when it comes to knitted toys or handmade toys. And so really getting the placement right and the angle of things right can make a really big difference to whether you like your outcome or not. All right, so now I'm just gonna go underneath my beard here. And I'm just gonna tie a little knot. I'm gonna go under the thread of a stitch. I'm gonna go a second time and that will make a loop. And then I will go through that loop twice. So I'm going to go through, my end is getting short, so I will just go through threading it this way. Doesn't matter which end threads of the needle threads through, as long as the yarn end goes through. And I go through twice, and then I tighten it up. And I can, at this point, weave it in the back of the beard if I want to, because fuzzy yarn is really forgiving that way. Or we can put it back through the body and snip it. So we could go through the body, just going straight through. Doesn't matter where you come out. What you'll do is you'll pull tight and snip right up next to the fabric and it will disappear inside. If your arms are looking a little lumpy in places, because I-cord sometimes does, just gently roll it like a Play-Doh snake and you will find that the tension evens out almost like magic. And then sew the arms on right at the junction of the beard, the hat, and the body. Nice and tight. Go through the body, through the beard. No, go through the arm, then go through the body. I always like to go under a stitch when I'm going into the body. And then we go a few times in this direction, then we'll go a few times in this direction. Through the arm, up and over in the other direction. If this is going to be a toy, you need to secure it as snugly as you can, as stably as you can. Every appendage will be used to carry a toy, so make sure that you do it in multiple directions. If it's a toy, for instance, I would also go under the arm and then attach, go under a stitch, go through part of the arm, and do it a few times in that direction as well, and that will really help stabilize. It'll provide sort of 3 directions of stabilization, and then tie a knot. You can bury your end back up through the I-cord or through the body. It's your choice. The more ends you have in the arm, the more stable it will be, and it's almost like it's a way of stuffing them. So it's your choice. Because there is no hat brim that will cover this face or the tops of the arms, make extra certain that you like the placement and that you like the way you finished it before knotting and getting rid of your end. You really need to make sure that you like the public facing sides of this toy before you finish up. All right, so we've got 2 little feet. Placement will really change the personality on these feet. So if you go like 2 little feet right here, that looks very different than 2 little feet right here, which looks very different than 2 little feet here. So play around, see what you want. I'm going to line mine up with the edges of my beard. So I'm going to make one of these disappear. I'm just going to weave it in to the nose, or I'm just going to embed it in the foot and cut it off. And then we have only one end to deal with while we're trying to sew this on. So my choice for the feet is to take them and put it so that the inside part of the foot is in line with the edge of the beard. So the feet will be just outside the beard. And all I'm going to do, and this is a little hard because these feet are so short and stubby, is just take a little bit of fabric inside this garter purl ridge here and then into the foot. If the foot is too far under the body, your doctor is going to be a little tippy. So we don't want Dr. Morel here to be tippy. So just make sure you're sewing this so that it just barely sits under the body and is sort of the impression of feet and isn't going to send you all tippy. So first attach your other foot and then see if your Dr. Morel is stable, and then you can always go and knot and cut your ends. And now as I look at these 2, I realize I've done my feet in the wrong color and will have to take them off and reattach them. But the process is the same and you don't need to be there while I do that. So hopefully the video helped you. Happy knitting and I can't wait to see your versions.